I wouldn't be where I'm at knowing what I know had I not had the internet. I think it's incredible on so many levels. Like, I would be 300 pounds living in the Midwest eating pizza rolls right now, not having this amazing conversation with you, not having made my life any better. I would have been in the black hole that I was born into.
Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really grateful and honored for you being here. And I've studied and learned about your story in the past 2 weeks, and I'm very inspired by how you seem to have just a good heart. And it seems like the work that you've done is because you're compelled to do it. And I don't come across a lot of people in the world who are operating from that ethos. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. Episode 300, I think. What an honor to be in a monumental podcast number with you.
Yes, sir. It's an absolute pleasure for it to be with you. I figured we'd start this podcast off with a compelling story. And a compelling story, the one that comes to mind initially, and that you've told a bunch, but it would be great if you could tell it again, is you going to Tanzania and staying with the Hamza tribe.
Yeah, I mean, obviously crazy experience, one I'll never forget, but one would probably need to understand why I would do something like that. I think that looking back at my life and what I've been interested in and try to tie together, like, I basically had 4 different careers at this point. I've been bouncing around, but I'm most interested in, it started with physical health for me. So why are people so sick and how do you fix them and get them better? That's what led me to be a clinician early on. That's sort of evolved to thinking about health in a much different lens. So the way I think about it, the name of my podcast is The Natural State, because I think that the natural state of any organism is health. We try to optimize for it to see, all the things that we need to do to achieve this state of health. Like, it's some elusive thing that we don't have a right to, that we need to get. So if I'm looking at outside and I see an animal walking by, if it's in its proper environment, it's going to be healthy. It doesn't have to do anything. It is healthy by default. Sickness and illness and disease, both physical, and I'm getting more into the last couple of years, mental, emotional, spiritual health and disease. But the disease part is the thing that is abnormal. And so being obsessed now with what is the proper human environment? What is the proper human expression of health and richness? And not just physical health, but all of these things combined, has led me to want to go to experience, okay, what is the best thing we can go to see? And it's not a perfect representation of it, because it is definitely different, but where can I go see an actual human environment and how we've evolved for the last hundreds of thousands of years? And I had the opportunity to go see the Hadza tribe in Tanzania. And they have been living in this area by Lake Yasi for over 50,000 years. They are like one of the last tribes that have been that long. I think there's only like 7 tribes that are actual hunter-gatherers that are left in the entire world. This is one of them. So I had the opportunity to go visit them, to just witness and see, again, what is a normal human environment? What can I learn from this? So that's why I went.
And you go there and you're like, all right, what changes do I need to make in my own life immediately after?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was a big catalyst for me. This was in February 2021, and I already been dabbling in a lot of emotional, spiritual health, things like that. But the physical health stuff I've been obsessed with for a long time, and I feel like I've kind of got that unlocked. But it was the happiness and contentment that I saw from them that I had never seen anywhere else. I've traveled like 30 plus countries. I've done a lot. I've been to a lot of different places, and I've never seen humans be this happy, cooperative, and not even like a form of leisure, but this form of abundance that they had no right to have. Like, their hunting land has encroached in. They have to hike now. We went on a hunt. We had to go 20 miles to kill a baboon and bring it back to a tribe of 40 people. They used to be able to go out a kilometer, throw a rock, and kill an antelope and eat all day long. And so they have no reason to have this sense of just ease and abundance. But they have, for example, they had these fruit around, and you have to like throw it at a tree, but there's an enormous amount. And I went with my friend Paul, and we were walking around like, hey, can we try it? Can we try those? What's going on? Why is no one eating those? And so even though they were hungry, because they weren't eating that much, they weren't consuming endlessly like we do now. And their sense of ease in participation with their environment and how they live within their environment, to me, was a big catalyst to moving into wanting to do farming. And that was a shift for me. I'm like, okay, I need to get out of the city and live on land to see what I can recreate here.
What is the average person supposed to do? Like, I'm just considering my own life, and from listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing so much wrong, quote unquote, like living in a high-rise apartment building, like using phone, laptop all day, like lack of sunlight, lack of connection to the soil, eating Chipotle, which I thought was supposed to be good for me. And then like I'm studying you and like, oh, there's problems with the seed oils. And I'm like, I'm doing so much wrong. Where do I even begin?
Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky part. This is why I think I've changed careers a bunch, because there's no easy way to do it. And I've always been fascinated in learning more and more and more. And I think you just, as with anything in life, having an outcome is great, but looking of where you're at and what changes you can make. Obviously, whatever is interesting to you or wherever you want to grow is the best place for you as an individual. I don't think everybody needs to go, live on the land and move to some intentional community in Costa Rica and like, grow their hair into a ponytail. Like, I don't think that's required to have optimal human health. Like, I'm interested in not building this utopia where people feel like they need to be a hunter-gatherer in Tanzania, but how can you optimize as many things as possible and remove them from the bandwidth that you have in your head and toss them away, so that way you can focus on living the best version of yourself and living optimally as a human now. And so, for example, we have this obsession, just to pick on sleep for a moment. People are, they have their sleep trackers, they have their red light screen, they have their red light glasses, they have, I have these blackout shades that go down, and I have this mattress with a certain thread count on the sheets, and the mattress cools at this time to make sure, okay, if you just go outside and work hard outside all day long, you don't have to worry about sleep. Again, it's one of these things, like if you fix your environment and change more of your environment things, you don't have to optimize 35 different things. So when you're thinking about sleep, and then you add in movement, and then you add in nutrition, and then you add in air quality, and then you add in water quality, and then you add in community, spiritual connection, all these things, you have to start like our modern world says you need to do more things to get what you want. And I am trying to think of like, how do we recreate an environment so you have to think less about these things?
Okay, so the rebuttal to that is that in order to divorce, we understand, a lot of people intuitively understand, if you want to make a lot of money and create freedom for yourself, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong in saying any of this, it feels like you need to go to the internet to attain some level of freedom for yourself in order to create wealth. And so you're right that spending more time doing hard work and intensive labor outside is going to provide greater sleep. But how do you get the best of both worlds? You sell a company, or you don't need to. Like, you had a tweet that was like, are there any ways to make money, a lot of money, and also do hard work, hard physical work? And you were just asking a question about that. And I believe it was like 6 months ago. And I'm curious, like, what comes to mind for you when I say all of that?
Yeah, you can't. And this is one of the weird modern things about the world, is that so we're in this system, and one of the reasons why I think the Hadza tribe was so content is because they all had skills to survive and provide what they need for themselves indefinitely without having to have some weird extracted way that we do it now. So, for example, they live in a way where if no one came to visit them again, ever again, they would act the same way they have for the last 50,000 years. They would make their own shelter, they would make their own food, or they would get it via hunting and gathering, and they would survive because they know how to live in the environment. We don't have that anymore. So what we have to do now is go do something to make money to then buy the thing that we need to actually survive. And I think that as long as we have that model, there's always going to be some level of scarcity, because I had an exit. I don't have to work how things are now. If we have crazy inflation, like, then I'm screwed just like everybody else. Like, there's, and everybody to some degree has this, where if you don't have the skills in the community to get the actual things that humans need, safety, food, shelter, essentially survival, well, then you're always going to need to make money. But there are obviously like a spectrum of this, where I encourage people to go make as much money as they possibly can early on, so they can start thinking through these things and doing more of what they actually care about. And I think front loading like an entrepreneurial career at the beginning of a career and optimizing for that. And I have no judgment on how people make their money, as long as it's not an intentional way. Like, if you know like something makes someone sick and you're being extractive about it, and you're not providing any value, like I think a lot of big food companies do, and most what I call new big food, which is Oatly, Beyond, Impossible, Smart Sweets, all these companies, just all the fake food. You're actively making the world a worse place, not a better place. So like, if you can provide value, I don't give a shit what you do. Like, go make as much money as possible. But yeah, I posed that question on Twitter because I want to help people do positive things and the things that I care about and support. And I want more entrepreneurs to exist. But there is an absolute reality that to have money, to have safety, security, food, shelter, you need to make a lot of money right now. And you need to go solve that problem first, or else you're going to be Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You're going to be way down below, and you're going to be stressed out all the time and not being able to be your own expression of consciousness, or whatever you want to say, doing what you're doing best. So for sure, I think people should optimize on it, and it's an absolute contradiction. And I wish it weren't so. I wish there were a lot of things that weren't so about our current predicament of how we're living as humans. But I also don't think the way is going back. I think we have to like adapt and keep moving forward.
Okay, so when you look at the way modern humans are living, and you spent a lot of time thinking about this, what is the couple or the biggest areas of problems that we are currently facing?
Number one, for sure, is nutrition. It's undeniable. It's the biggest lever people can pull. It's the one that's destroying us the most. I think that if you don't have proper nutrition going in, it screws your brain chemistry. It creates just all this dysfunction in your body, and you can't have good mental health without good physical health. It's just impossible. And with physical health and your body, nutrition is by far the biggest thing you can do. There's obviously other things in physical health that you can focus on, so that way you can ensure that you have good mental health and emotional health. And then you can start worrying about your family, your community, and providing value for others. I think I heard Naval Ravikant talk about this, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago when he first started getting popular, around how he thinks about these things in concentric circles. And I don't know what his order is, but you have to focus on physical health, and then your own mental and emotional health, and then your spiritual health, and then people close to you, and then your communities, and then you can start doing things which people think they ought to do all the time, which is like create scale and have a huge impact and save the world. I think that food is undoubtedly the number one thing that is messed up in our environment, that is derailing humanity, and is the biggest problem we face today.
Okay, so up until a week ago or 2 weeks ago when I started looking into your stuff, I felt or thought, all right, if I'm hitting my protein intake every day and I'm keeping carbs and fats to a certain level, so I'm eating the right calories, I'm eating the right protein, I am doing a good job nutritionally. That was my understanding of the world up until a week or two ago. And then I'm learning from listening to you on 10 different podcasts about how, well, yes, but that's just like the baseline of the start, where all of the food systems that we rely on are broken in some respect. And so you can be getting the right protein in, and the right amount of calories, but there's so much more going on there. Can you help break that down for people listening and me as well?
Yeah, I think there are some foundational things when you think about food and nutrition that are inarguable. And one of them to me is one must eat real food. And what I think about as real food is things that spoil. And on top of that, like, you have all this argument of, high carb, low carb, vegan, carnivore. Like I don't care. I've seen enough of human people who have thrived on different things, but no one has thrived on a highly processed food diet anywhere throughout history, period. And so once you get that part down, feel free to tweak and figure out and use nutrition as a tool to get whatever goal you want. And if that's to have 3% body fat or to be able to run marathons or just to feel good, I don't care. Like it may be different for you as an individual, but you cannot get there unless you are eating real food. But the thing is, what that is in people's ability to taste and understand what real food is, like there's now the spectrum in real food that's really confusing and complicated. And so, for example, fruit has been, bred and bastardized to a crazy degree over the last 100+ years, and now it's something that would never have been found in nature. Again, I don't really care. But even if, with the Hadza actually, so we went with them and we found a beehive and we ate a bunch of honey. And so people go, oh, the Hadza eat honey, therefore that's a real food that hunter-gatherers ate. Therefore, I'm going to have a gallon of honey on my countertop, and then I should be eating that all the time. And so, of course, there's some confusion here, but I think that you'll get 95% of it right as long as you're eating stuff that generally spoils. That's the basic thing. And then if you, same thing with concentric rings, you can keep improving at this. And the closer you can get to where your food is grown and how that food is grown matters immensely. So, for example, producing even grains that you'd eat. I don't think humans should eat grains, but you can grow them locally in your backyard and do it in a very different way and then mill it and ferment it and make it a sprouted sourdough. That's a very different thing than having a massive monocrop GMO that's sprayed with chemicals, fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, and now you're eating that. Same with chickens, for example. You could have a mass industrial animal, or you could have one that's grown at a local family farm. And so within real food, now there's another spectrum of how was the intention of this food grown? Was there any love or care put into it? Did it make the ecosystem more resilient and harmonious? Or is it an extractive process? And I think that I'm starting to get to a point of understanding with food, and I've heard myself start talking about this stuff maybe 5 years ago, I would have laughed in my face. But I'm starting to understand
why
the spiritual connection with food and the importance of eating food for a spiritual reason. Not to say that it's like some religious thing. I think people can confuse this. But if you're eating things that the sole purpose of their creation was to extract from the ground and then to extract money from you, how do you not think that that's going to transfer to you in some way? For example, last night, my wife and I just got to Hudson Valley. We're traveling around a little bit. We're going to be here for a couple of weeks. One of the first things I do is I pop out to farms and I go buy a bunch of food. We went to this amazing place up here they're doing all this incredible stuff, biodynamic farming, which we can get into in a second. They have raw milk, beef, cheese, all this stuff. I bought a bunch of it. We started eating it here last night. We had a case of organic strawberries from Whole Foods. So I was eating that, and I had a bite of a strawberry from Whole Foods after I ate that food. And I tasted it, and I spit it out. I was like, this isn't food.
You could just tell.
It tasted like there was no life in it. Like it just tasted like I was eating something that was a little sweet. Not like it was some vibrant thing that I was consuming that I want to be that is giving me any sort of vitality or nourishment. Again, we're getting down to this is now like the crazy optimization. I know that's not what you asked, but just to elucidate, there is a spectrum in this stuff, and that's what I've been interested in. So that's why I've obsessed about this type of stuff. And I've done this now with everything in human health pretty much. And I keep finding new things, which is cool. But if it's for you and you feel good and you're doing those things, I would say it depends on your goal and your outcome. You know what I mean? If you're eating Chipotle and you're doing that, but you're sitting on the couch all day long, you have no purpose, you're not sleeping at all, you have no relationships, I would say who cares about the tablespoon of sunflower oil you're getting? Go focus on the other things, get the 80-20 figured out across the board, and then start tinkering again, going into some nuance. So it's very individual and dependent, but if you're going to get the 80-20 on anything, food is the one to master first.
Okay, so where would you rank the importance of seed oils in the importance of just the spectrum of the things you eat?
In thinking about the question that has haunted me my whole life of why are people so sick and how do we fix this? I think the single thing, many things make us sick now. So many things. But I think if you were to take a percentage of what on that pie chart is the biggest slice, 100% I would vote for seed oils.
100%. So
that would be my vote.
What is a seed oil? Because I didn't know what a seed oil was until 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't know. Yeah. And even though you're living and breathing this and have for quite some time, what is a seed oil?
So I'm glad that it got rebranded as a seed oil. It used to be called vegetable oils, which was a very good branding from the large companies that did it. So vegetable oils, everybody knows that term. It's the same thing. They're not from vegetables, they're from seeds. And so these are any oils or fats that are produced from seeds like canola, which is from the rape seed. You have soybean, which is bean, which is a seed. Sunflower seed, corn, cottonseed, rice bran, so rice grain is seed, and anything like that. So rice, sunflower, safflower, soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, grapeseed, all of these things. So they're in, people consume right now, our total caloric load is 25% seed oils.
Okay.
This food didn't exist 90 years ago. It has gone from 0% to 25% of our total calorie intake within 100 years. People say that there's a naturalistic fallacy of like, oh, if nature didn't produce it or whatever. Just like hey, are there any jobs you can do to make a lot of money that are involved in nature outside? The answer is no. Are there any things that we've made, that we've eaten as a human, that have not existed, that have ever been good for our health? Ever? The answer is no. We have no instances like that. We've had a lot of instances where we try to use technology to make new foods, and it's made us sick. Margarine is a good example. And then we realize, oh shit, this is like ruining, it's like giving us a heart disease. We should stop eating this imminently. The guy who popularized this about margarine and got it banned, Fred Kummerow, who was 103 years old when he did this, sued the FDA because they ignored research trials on the effect of margarine. He thinks that seed oils and the consumption of seed oils was a worse problem than margarine and trans fats. So margarine, trans fats, I'm using those kind of like interchangeably here, but trans fats, smoking, these are all these things, phthalimide, some of these things where we think they're okay, and then we realize 10, 20, 50, 70, 100 years later, oh shit, we were poisoning everybody. The same exact thing is going on. We've done this. We've seen this happen throughout all of our industrial food history, and we just can't seem to learn that we're on the side where quote unquote science is saying there's not enough compelling evidence that taking cotton seeds or soybeans or rape seeds, growing them in huge industrial places, running them through with tractors, putting them in a factory, you can't press them to get oil out. So what you have to do is you have to add chemical solvents. You have to do an insane industrial process. Then it's so rancid when it comes out that it smells like rotten fish. So then you have to deodorize it and clarify it and filter it and do all of these things. Like literally you're taking something that is not for human consumption 30 different times and trying to make it a trick so that we can consume it so it's flavorless and odorless. And now we're eating 25% of our calories from these things. And the tragic thing is most people do not know that they're eating any of it because it comes in packaged foods, restaurants. I tell a story often about I couldn't go anywhere. One day we went to a lunch. I couldn't order anything on the menu at this place in South Congress, like this new restaurant. I asked. There's nothing on the menu that I could get without seed oils already baked into the marinade of the steak, or they won't cook an egg without using it. I had to leave the restaurant because I didn't want to eat any seed oils. I couldn't eat a single thing.
What should the average person do?
I mean, this is the thing of like, we're at the early phase of this. It's become a trend now where like there's this, again, my friend Paul I was talking about, he's a carnivore guy, Paul Saladino, carnivore MD. He posted about seed oils the other day, and Instagram tagged him false information, misinformation, for saying that seed oils are bad.
You went to a restaurant and you asked about the oils that it was cooked in, and the waiter said to his fellow waiter, like, could you believe these Alex Jones conspiracy theory type people?
Yes, that's what happened.
But I'm confused why it is so, why people, and not just people, why companies are so against it.
Well, this is the thing that's happened in our society, especially over the last 2 years, is that anyone that has a semi-contrarian belief system is lumped into a category. If you don't want to take a vaccine, if you don't want to wear a mask, if you believe X, Y, or Z thing, like you are racist, you're right-wing conspiracy theorists. Like if you go against mainstream anything, then you're in this bucket. And if you're not, then you take what everybody else says. So the guy, when Paul posted this thing and it said misinformation, I clicked on it and say, how the hell do they say that's misinformation? And you go to a post and it says, here's why we say it's misinformation. And this guy, you go down, well, expert says that it's not bad for you. And the expert is this guy, Darius Mozaffarian, who I think is literally our modern day version of a James Bond villain. This guy, I don't know if you've seen the rounds in the nutrition sphere of, he published this thing called a food compass funded by the NIH, saying, here's a food score that we're going to rank 0 to 100 on the healthiest foods. Beef was like in the single digit low. You know what was in like the 90s and the highest? Frosted Flakes, Honey Nut Cheerios, bagels and like all this type of stuff. It's insane. It's literally like an inversion of what you'd expect. Why? Because they are funded by these massive multinational corporations. The vegetable industry is a many billion-dollar industry. They fund whack science. People pick that up and they run with it, and they don't want to challenge any of the things. Like this same thing happened with sugar 50 years ago. We have books written about it. I don't know why it's so hard to believe, like, hey, is this happening again? Yes or no? The answer is yes.
So what should the average person do about it?
So the average person can do is, I mean, it's very challenging. I think the biggest thing you can do, another thing around like food, okay, buy real food. Another one is just cook your own food. And I know people think that they don't have time for that. If you're working that much, then hopefully you have some extra income to pay somebody else to cook your own food. But that's something that people that I've worked with in the past, when they've taken that step in ownership of their food to do that, have reached their goals so much easier, no matter what their goal is, if it's a weight loss, cancer remission, better brain function, doing a ketogenic diet or any of these things, because it's really challenging to go anywhere. I basically only eat in one restaurant in Austin. It's Daidue. I worked with them in a while. They changed their fryers to use beef tallow. So they basically, in some of their sauces, they still use a little bit of vegetables, but mostly they do not. Otherwise, any sauce, any fried food, any of these things at any restaurant is going to have a huge amount of seed oils. If you're eating any packaged food, look at the ingredient label, and you will see in 90% of packaged food, there's some sort of oil. Even avocado oil, for example, there's a study at UC Davis, Selena Wang did it, showed that 83% of avocado oils surveyed, out of like 20 plus avocado oils, the main selling ones, 83% of them were either cut with soybean oil or just pure soybean oil. But like, what are you supposed to do here other than like know where your food comes from and cook for yourself? I don't really know at this point. But asking restaurants, can you cook without? I mean, you get enough times people doing this that it will create a momentum, and it we'll get through this at some point. And in 50 years, hopefully, we'll look back and be like, oh man, why were we doing that? Why are so many people eating that? But like we're at a weird point right now where people are sort of waking up to it and realizing this is the case. But yeah, I mean, as far as what a normal person can do, like be aware of what you're eating. And I think most people just have no connection with their food. They don't know what they're putting in their mouth. They trust the restaurant, they trust the company to do it. And honestly, if you're not buying from a farmer, even if a farmer holds this, wherever you're at, their main motive is to make money. If you're at a restaurant, they're not using butter or ghee because fat is flavorless, and they can easily use canola oil so that they can make money so they can stay in business. You're not going there so they can take care of your health. You're going there so the restaurant can make money off of you. If you're going to a place in a grocery store to buy packaged food, they're not providing that so that way they can make you healthy. They're providing that so they can make $1 off of you. And so when you have cheap ingredients that people can substitute, sunflower oil is probably the biggest one that I see people misstepping on because they think of all the seed oils, it sounds the healthiest. Oh, sunflower. Yeah, I know what a sunflower is. It's beautiful. It's great. Like, of course, it's healthy. But it's actually one of the worst ones. So the fatty acid in this linoleic acid, about 80% in sunflower. And it's in all of the health foods, quote unquote health foods. And so that's that soybean oil, canola oil. Like if you can cut those out, huge benefit.
What should I be cooking with? Beef tallow, I've heard you mention before.
Yep.
I bought pork fat. Is that acceptable? I can get the label if that's helpful, but
I mean, this is where the rabbit hole continues. So pork and chicken are fed 99.9% of them are fed corn and soy.
Oh my God.
And so the reason why this stuff is bad for us, we eat 25% of these oils, and normally when you eat a food, you digest it and then it's done. But with these fatty acids, these fragile omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, they embed, like your body's made of these things. So with amino acids, we can break them down and build them back up. Like Lego's not a big deal when we're making tissues. But with fatty acids, your body there's not a lot of conversion steps. There's some, but not a lot. So your body takes the fatty acid you get, puts it in your tissues. The problem is those get put into your mitochondria, all of your cell walls, all of your nervous tissue, and it takes 2+ years for them to get out of your body. And so you're eating this stuff. It takes you're living with that meal for literally 2 years. And then this is how it compounds over time, and you get slow creeps of inflammation. So when they say, well, we did this 6-week trial and it showed no difference in the interventional group of not eating seed oils and this group that eats seed oils. So 2 things here. Not long enough to figure out because it compounds. You're eating stuff every 2, it's like you're accumulating these things. But on top of that, the people that go into the study have eaten seed oils their entire life. So if they have that, you would need a 2-year clearance window to start the experiment if you were going to make sure that it was an actual experiment. And so all the data is wrong because of that reason. In some of these studies, there's others that show the clear mechanisms here. But yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, the rabbit hole continues. So that same thing happens with pigs and chickens when they eat tons of corn and soy. So then their fatty acids look worse than canola oil.
Wow. Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
Good to know.
It's confusing, man.
How do you even get to the place of being able to study all these concepts and ideas and understandings?
It's just honestly what I think about when I'm like, my eyes are closed before I go to bed, like these things. And I've gone through most of the physical health stuff where like now I'm thinking more about work and rituals and spiritual health and like what human richness is in those senses. But for me, it's always like, what is the environment that we're missing out on and how do we recreate it in the modern world? Not how do we go back, but how do we get most of it back now? And so I mean, it's basically my own quest of,
right.
I'm looking for my own, not enlightenment by any word, but like, how do I optimize, not biohack my life, but how do I recreate an environment where I can experience life with the richest, human experience that I possibly can? And so it's more like a self-exploration. I'm just fascinated with it. And so I keep going down these rabbit holes and figuring it out.
Yeah, I guess my question was more so along the lines of like, how do you create the freedom in your own life how did you get to the point of being able to take a year off to explore your curiosity? What was it? How did you build your company to get to the point of being like, all right, like now I can focus on, I mean, your company that you sold was in respect trying to help people's health to begin with. So it's obviously been something on your mind, but what do you do? How did you get to the point of being like, all right, I sold my company. Now I can spend a year to thoroughly go into my passions and pursuits, become a farmer. Like, take me through that journey.
Yeah, I would say that I have been obsessively looking into this stuff for the last 15 plus years, 20 years maybe. So I would say I don't think you should ever wait to start on your passions before you have some event to allow you to do that. Get after it nights and weekends, like be tenacious.
Yes.
And that's honestly what has led me to be able to do what I do now, which is more research, more of this type of stuff. And it was never really an intentional, even though I said, I think most people should go and try to make money so they can have freedom to do whatever they want. I was lucky to be fascinated in things and develop skills and just chase the actual thing I cared about, like providing value and fixing problems for people. And that has allowed the success for me to do the other things. And so it was never like an intentional, here's the way I'm going to devise to make X amount of money. But it was the only way I knew how to help people when I was younger through this journey of like reclaiming a resilient human experience was being a doctor. And the only way I knew how to do that in a way that wasn't extractive, working for big pharma companies, basically, was being a chiropractor. So I got fast tracked to that. Worked with some pro sports teams, a lot of physical stuff, got into nutrition, and then like pivoted more towards like functional medicine work, dealing with labs and more of that type of stuff. Then got into metabolic dysfunction, and then that got me into keto. And then I thought, man, so many people are screwed up here. How do we help more people? I can only help 50 people a week in my clinic. Then that went to perfect keto. And then we were obsessed with creating content and helping people through this journey. And honestly, we snuck a lot in of so we posted like 1,000+ articles, did a bunch of videos, podcasts, book, etc. But when we say like, hey, here's how you lose fat with ketosis, it includes eating real food, it includes moving, it includes sleep. Like, how can we sort of use this as a Trojan horse for people wanting to lose weight to fixing metabolic dysfunction and some of the underlying lifestyle choices that actually make people sick in the first place? And then that, I think, was the reason why the company blew up and did so well. And obviously, like timing the keto trend and being one of the first companies in the space was allowed that to grow. But yeah, it was never like an intentional, this must be the thing of how I make money. And I would say taking on the farm project was another like big shift in the career, but it was like, it's been the next step of, okay, I was with this Hadza tribe and I care about, I talk about real food. It's not just about eating real food. It's about, and like how much food can we produce, which is the main question of the world right now. It's how do we remain productive? How can we keep producing food? Because 99% of how we produce food right now, that's not going to last much longer.
Why not?
And I don't mean to be alarmist about it, but we expect infinite consumption from a planet with finite resources. And we do not think of, when we take this thing, are we, is the bank account of the ecosystem that we're drawing from being replenished? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, we're going to go into the red eventually, and we're going to be screwed. And that's how we do 99% of agriculture. And so this term regenerative agriculture is about using animals and other crops to be able to actually restore ecosystems, build up that diversity, and create more life and harmony than what was pre-existing. So that's why I got into farming, because now I'm obsessed about that, and now I need to get into that and actually like figure out how to do that and provide value. And I think that even though the exit from Perfect Keto was great and set me up well for the rest of my life, it was, in all measures, a terrible move for me. Like moving from being a clinician to like e-com entrepreneur and having this startup, I was making more money. I was getting more like notoriety. I was being more successful on every sort of societal level. Shifting from e-com entrepreneur to small farmer, I'm spending tons of money. I'm working way more. Actually, like no one gives a shit. No one cares. Like I can only help certain, like I had 8 pigs. Like that was all I could make the first pig time. You know what I mean? Like I downgraded every single little thing, but I've kept this passion for learning and excitement that like, maybe that will lead to something else. And then I will have another big successful thing. Like it's just not something that I've ever tried to like optimize for myself as an outcome.
I heard you talk about the difficulties of going from e-com entrepreneur where you could, your aim was to leverage your time and resources. And now you're working on the farm where you could quote unquote hire someone to build a fence, but that is not what is bringing you fulfillment and joy. Could you talk about that transition of like, how do you reframe your mind when your mind is built on scale and the ability to impact more people and to use your time effectively, and now you're going and doing the opposite, and both were fulfilling?
Yeah, again, I think it's just honestly me pulling on threads and asking what's interesting to me. Like I want to contribute the most I can to helping small farmers be successful. I think that's probably the highest leverage thing to do. To, you know, this question that I'm most focused on now is, yes, how do we live this rich, resilient human lifestyle in the modern world, and how do we fix our environment? But if we don't fix the ability to continue producing food, we are so screwed. And so this is the thing that I'm most focused on, is like, how can I most help small farms exist, new small farms and existing small farms? And to do that, like I can't do that without being a small farmer myself and becoming a legitimate expert myself. Mm-hmm. And so I know there's some people who can like go tangentially and not be the person that they're trying to help in business or whatever. And great for them. I can't do that. I need to experience and go fully in on what I'm learning to be able to provide value to that community. And that's why I'm like, no, yeah, I have resources that most farmers don't have, but I'm not going to let that allow me to not feel the suck of how much when a piece of fence falls down and you have to get up at 4 a.m. to fix it and then chase your pigs down and throw them back in the corral. Like, I want to understand all the problems, and I want to live this life so I can best serve those people. It's kind of the approach that I've taken. And it's just, I think the more satisfying way to work. I think that, again, looking at the normal human environment, and I've gone through this sort of development of how I've approached work, very service industry before, like one-on-one with patients, moved into never seeing a person and helping millions of people, making millions of dollars, to now producing food for people in my community. And then that's going to change again, I'm sure. But the type of work has changed a lot. And in that as well, between Perfect Keto and between farming, I didn't work at all. And so I kind of like had all these different types of work and also not working, having this life that I think all e-commerce entrepreneurs fantasize about, which Tim Ferriss warned us about in the 4-Hour Work Week many years ago, of like, hey guys, the goal is not to not work.
Let me go at a beach somewhere.
Yeah, it's not to say that I was like trying to have a life of leisure. Like I was learning in that time. I was applying myself in different ways. I was being a really good friend and partner to my wife and a lot of these things. But at the end of the day, I felt completely purposeless. Like by definition, useless. Like I'm not doing anything. And I think another one of these things that I'm starting to come around to, that I think is a requirement for human richness, mental, spiritual, emotional health, is the need for work. And not in a way that people think. I think when most people have, this is a word that's defined in such a way that, as author Ivan Illich calls, plastic words. So it doesn't mean anything. It means whatever the person wants to define it as. Like, and I think associative with work are these other things like love, happiness, fun. People think they should love their work, and that that means to them, like whatever menial task that they hate that they're doing, like they should find joy and excitement in it. And I think love is one of these terms where, I don't know if you've been in a really long-term relationship or anything else, like dealing with family, like love isn't the honeymoon phase. It's not lust. It's commitment, respect, reverence, showing up day in, day out. Like that's love. And so like loving your work to me is doing the things that are required of the role that you're taking on. And so being a farmer, doing fencing or whatever menial task that me working at a computer would think of dumb, useless manual labor, well, that's the role of what I should be doing. Like that is the purpose of that's the job, and I take respect of that job, and I'm doing that thing. And I think that trying to outsource everything and trying to have this optimized, super efficient lifestyle, I've done it. Made me miserable. Made me fucking miserable. And then I didn't work, made me even more miserable. And now I'm starting to rebuild some of these habits and focus on work as a very different thing. I think it's, hard challenges, hard physical things, which is why I love farming. It's like you have to do hard stuff all the time, can reprogram our relationship to doing actual work and be committed to doing the thing. And as with most things in our human environment, we did not used to have to think about this, like with sleep in the sun, up and down, whatever, being outside. But now we have to manage it. And we didn't have to think about work. We just had to do it to survive. We didn't have to think about being uncomfortable. Those things presented themselves. Now we have a life of complete comfort. And so I think we have to choose discomfort often. And that filter of choosing discomfort will exercise the muscle of doing actual work and not complaining about it and trying to optimize things and delegate so you don't have to do anything you don't like and you should just work in your zone of genius and all these things, which I think is just a shortcut to like egotistical mania and misery, honestly.
So when your wife, I believe, is a relationship coach, and I'm curious what you've learned from her about relationships and about love.
Same thing, man. Getting married and like is a recent thing for me, and relationships are work. They are a lot of work, and they require cooperation and growth. No one's perfect, and I think like most people, especially with the world we live in, and this doesn't apply for relationships. It's like it's literally everything: your house, how you eat, how you dress, your friends, your job, whatever. People post their highlight reel and only their positive experiences. And so we're programmed to think life should just be a bunch of pleasurable experiences. And people are optimizing for incessant pleasure and comfort. No good relationship comes from excessive pleasure and comfort. No good work comes from excessive pleasure and comfort. And so it's one of these things of like, the expectation is so skewed on what the thing should be. And she helps people all the time. I think it's a skewed, like people want to jump from relationship to relationship. You go back on the app, start swiping again, because your next true love is just, one swipe away. And then you'll find the person who's right for you. Is such a crazy concept. Like we have, again, no need for commitment. We used to have this social cohesion where you only had your set tribe and like, you gotta make it work between those people for the rest of your life. And we have no need for that anymore. So it's so easy to, with the simultaneous expectation that you have limitless options out there that are going to be easier, more comfortable, with less struggle and more pleasurable than what you're experiencing now. So most relationship problems are, I think, just the frame of that and not the practice of any skills of how to learn and grow and get uncomfortable, be vulnerable, to apologize, work through something, learn the skills of communication and conflict. These are crazy skills that, again, I don't think were necessary ever before, but are necessary now, and nobody thinks about them.
What's something you've changed your mind on recently?
I think the work thing is a big thing. It's not like I was optimizing to not work ever again, but I thought it would get easier.
Why?
And I'm realizing that if you actually do harder things, life is easier. Like it's just counterintuitive, like, a David Goggins or someone like that would say, Cam Hanes or some of these people. Like, it's true. Like I was noticing myself at the end of last year procrastinating with everything in my life. Every day I would wake up and journal, like, here's all the shit I want to get done today. And then I wouldn't get any of it done every single day. I was addicted to my phone. Every moment I was looking at social media, and I was just wasting all of my time. So I tried all of these things, wrote publicly about, like, hey, I'm like working on my phone addiction, tried social proof, tried to block apps, deleted apps, turned my phone off every Saturday, like tried to take time. Nothing would work. I was just being sort of a miserable, soft person. And so I thought, God damn it, like, how do I fix this? And I decided on a Thursday that I was going to run a marathon on Saturday. And this is with having run a total of about 3 miles in the previous 3 years. So extreme, maybe, yes. But I did it, and it was it was actually fine for like the first 14 miles. And then after that, I was in the pain cave, man. It was brutal. I was like, I thought the tendon in my foot on my right side was going to pop any second. I thought my Achilles was going to burst. My hips were on fire. My knees were like getting swollen. And going through this discomfort started rewiring my brain. It was very obvious after I got done with it. What I'm missing is just doing hard things. And I think we seek in our current environment, we're programmed always be more comfortable. And that, I think, pervaded my mind entirely to think, like, this should be getting easier. Like, as I get more successful, I should be more leveraged. And I should just, you know what I mean? I shouldn't have to do as much of the work. Other people should do work for me. All of these crazy stories that I think are very common. I think that the general thing is that when you're not doing hard physical things, particularly, at least for me, this is what I've experienced, I have a reliance to slip into doing the easy thing over and over and over again. And since that point, I've started to increase being uncomfortable every day physically. And it has made work in the many forms I'm doing it right now so much more enjoyable, and has led to a richness of my life that I would say, like, I have probably less pleasure throughout the day, but my life is so much more meaningful and feels so much more rich. And like every part of it is better from doing hard physical things. Like, I was at Martha's mom's house last week, and she was commenting about how I was like doing the dishes constantly and doing all these extra things. Like, it's not even a choice in my mind. I've just, through doing hard things, have now started to shift to doing all things and doing them well and enjoying them and not complaining about it and thinking, like, when is this going to be over so I can go sit on the couch? And like, So yeah, I mean, I think this is what I've started to change my mind on, is like the commitment to doing hard physical things, especially, and how that creates a momentum to doing hard anything, which is, again, I think, an antidote to most of the problems that we have in our current life.
I love that you took something that was like a challenge to yourself, running the marathon, and then you didn't just run a marathon and was like, all right, I got the lessons from it. You're like, all right, what can I do the next day to continue it? And you're still reaping the benefits of a incredibly difficult thing a year later. And that's pretty remarkable and shows like the power of moments. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is the hard thing or the hard physical disciplined thing you're doing today that you would have been uncomfortable doing a year ago? Like, what does the hard physical regime look like for Anthony Gustin?
I've done 3 so far today.
3 marathons?
No, 3 marathons. I think it's important to have a goal, because if, for example, I was just like, oh, I'm going to go run that Saturday, I would not have run 26.2 miles, which included a lot of suck, but also a lot of lessons about where I was quitting early in my life in other places. And so another thing I have that I'm working on now, that I just started a couple of weeks ago, is trying to get a front split. And I don't know if you've ever done that type of work before, but for me, it is the worst physical task that I've ever tried. Like it takes several years to get and feels like someone's ripping your tissues off of your bones. You have to do that to basically get to where you're going to get. And so for me, it's like, okay, I have to like do this pretty much every single day. Feel like my muscles are being ripped apart for like 30 to 45 minutes. And then I think there's times where like I've now gotten into a habit of when something sucks, I want to do it and I'm excited to do it because I know it makes the rest of my day better. So I got up today at 6:30 and it was raining out and I went outside and I just started running. And so I didn't have a goal there, but I just did that. I'm sitting on the floor right now, which is really uncomfortable for me and sucks. And I
Aaron Alexander, second guest in the last 3 to do this. Sit on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, you see the table behind me. I could be sitting on that, but I was like, you know what? This is going to be uncomfortable for the entire podcast. And like, I feel it in a certain part of my back. I'm like, man, I'm not used to doing this. I should probably do it. And so I think I'm starting to sprinkle in a bunch of those things. But yeah, I have several physical like goals for the year and like front split's one of them. And then I'm just, I'm just trying to do more things. And again, even a couple months ago, I would have thought I would be crazy right now saying all these things, but it's making my life so much better. And now I see the thing and I just do it. And I have such satisfaction in doing things and helping people and being useful. It's like the entire side of the other coin of when I had endless time and could do whatever I wanted, but actually didn't get anything done last year. And so I enjoy living like this way more. And I think to me, it's been an appreciation of, I also thought my relationship before was work is something that I do that I feel compelled that I have to do, much like an addict in any sort. And I think I was addicted to work before and I was using it as a crutch to not feel my emotions. And I think with any tool in life, you can abuse it or you can use it well. And I think I was using work as for sure a way to run away from actually dealing with what was going on inside of me. And so the story that I was running after then I sold the company and like, oh, I should take time off. And like, I was like, it was so bad to do that. It's not good to work that much. And now I've started to reframe and build back from an appropriate point, just like someone with an eating disorder or somebody who snacks a lot to not feel their emotions. Doesn't mean that they should never eat again. It means that they need to fix their relationship with the thing and reestablish a better vantage point and work on the underlying things, which is another, like, working on the mental emotional health piece is why it's been so interesting to me, because that's, again, a kind of a self-serving thing of like my own exploration of what I'm learning there. So that's been just a redefinition and reapplication of work and then how to do it and then how to integrate it back in my life with the physical challenges and all this type of stuff.
Yeah. In addition to food, it's like the way we view work as a whole is probably not optimal or ideal or healthy in any sense. But the problem is that everybody is reinforcing the notion of what it is. So it's like, it's hard to supersede that in some respect. Like you have a quote from Krishnamurti who says, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And I would add to that is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly working society in some respect, or at least the current working society we've propagated.
Yeah, I think with most things in culture, we just have a really skewed perception of what the thing is. We keep propagating that we should like hate our lives and what we're doing. It's really weird. Work is something you just have to do until you're 65 and then you don't do it. Work is just something you have to do until you make enough money so you don't have to do it. Like both of those are ridiculous in my mind. Like those are the two narratives that we run. Like people ditch I'm not going to work till I'm 65 to enjoy my life. I'm going to work hard now for a couple of years so I can enjoy the rest of my life. That's the same thing. It's just in a different time scale. So yeah, I mean, I think that we complain about work. Like it's something that we do away from all of the people who it actually benefits. Like probably the most important thing that we could do is work that impacts the people around us. And it's taboo for a woman to do any work in a household. It's absurd.
Yeah.
Like they have to go away from the home and away from their family and away from their community and away from any sort of family structure that has any meaning at all. So that way they can, again, try to get to a point where they don't have to work. It's wild.
Likewise, it would have been odd for a man to help out in the kitchen, like only 50 years ago, which is wild to think about too, right? Like, that a woman's job is to do that, right? So it's like, it's interesting how society works from both perspectives. It's like, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and tying back to the Hadza trip, they very clearly had gender roles. The women did X, Y, and Z thing. The men did A, B, and C things. And they both had this respect for each other that, hey, we wouldn't be here without these other people doing these other things. And so we asked the men about the women and what they do for work and what the men do for work. And they're like, oh yeah, like if they didn't take care of the babies and make sure like our camp was secure and do all the stuff that they do, like we would be screwed. And then we asked the women, hey, what do you think about like what you guys do versus what the men do? They're like, oh, if the men didn't go hunt and like make sure we had food to eat, we'd be screwed. And so it's just, again, love is respect and appreciation in commitment to a thing. And neither one of them could have done the things that the other appreciated without them doing the things for the other person. It's like the cyclical thing of actually caring for one another. And this is what is so weirdly removed from the work we do now as well, is that there's no feedback loop of I'm doing this for you and you're doing that for me. It's I'm doing this on a computer and I'll hit enter and hope that I make money from it. Which again is like a really weird way to think about work from how it used to be in all of our human history, which is providing value to those around you, legitimate value. And then in turn, knowing that you're doing that and you're depending on them providing value for you.
You spend a lot of time, rightly so, thinking about what is wrong with modern culture and modern society. I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think modern society is doing right or doing well?
That's a great question. I think that the ability to exchange ideas is good. I think a lot of people, it can work obviously against you in a way of the mind virus spreads fast for sure. And that's the case, but I think truth wins at the end of the day. And I wouldn't be where I'm at knowing what I know had I not had the internet. I think it's incredible. On so many levels. Like I would be 300 pounds living in the Midwest eating pizza rolls right now. Not having this amazing conversation with you, not having made my life any better. I would have been in the black hole that I was born into. So I think the ability to have mobility in your life to what you find is true, unparalleled to before. I wish we didn't have to do that. I wish we just lived in normal human societies, but we don't. But it's amazing that we have this technology and these tools to be able to foster these things. And like internet, man, it's crazy. Yeah, social media sucks too, but we met on Twitter and now we're having this great conversation. Like it's such an awesome thing that you can find and connect with people and find your tribe. Again, wish I just had my tribe with the values, but it's not the way it is. But these tools are amazing. I think people like to focus on the bad, but it's I mean, it's great. I mean, the same thing with technology. And I was in Wisconsin a couple of weeks ago doing my yearly review process up in the woods, middle of nowhere. I looked up this farm that was near me to get the food, as I said I do. It's my little habit I like to do. And I was helping this guy out with farm chores, and I was just curious. It was 40 below. I was like, how the hell do you farm in this weather? Even though I'm from Minnesota, I had no idea like how you would, now that I had been a farmer, I'm like, how would this work? And there were all these really cool technologies that he had on the farm that enabled him to do farming. And like we were doing farm chores for a couple hours, and it was amazing the ingenuity we have that's somewhat new. Like he had this enormous track loader, which is like, you know, like a snowmobile. It was
Yeah.
like that on a tractor. And that was able to, the technology that they have was able to take a 9,000 pound tractor and has less pounds per square inch than a human foot. And so that he could like take that over like these snowbanks and go to different places. They're like, this is amazing. Like to be able to do that, to enable people doing really good farming places like that. There's also like this well he was able to dig that didn't need a battery down to 20 below, that used geothermal heat and had this complicated valve system where cows could come up and drink from it and it wouldn't freeze in like 10 below weather.
It's
But
wild.
it required no electricity, which is mind blowing. And so like there's things like that where I was like, man, humans in technology, like it's not all bad for sure.
I think that a lot of the forecasting of a future world that doesn't look bright or isn't beneficial comes from using today's conditions and extrapolating them onto the future. Meaning, in 1970, you couldn't have known that in 2020 the internet would be widespread. And therefore, your predictions about what the world would look like would not include the internet, most likely, because you wouldn't understand how it would impact the world. In what ways do you think your own predictions about the future are potentially incorrect based on your own lack of knowledge about what a future 50 years from now is going to include?
I hope intensely that I'm wrong about my assessment of how we're producing food. I want to be wrong so badly because it literally terrifies me on a daily basis. How we're extracting resources from the planet to do things that are by definition unsustainable is terrifying to me. And I hope that, I mean, this is why I work on this stuff. And the same thing with the internet. Like, we needed people to work on that so that way it was how it is now. Like, I hope that we're planting seeds with what we're doing now with regenerative agriculture. That anybody who's involved in it, anybody doing anything remotely close to it, because we're going to need it to feed people. Again, I will repeat, and this is very clear to me. What we are doing to feed people now is incredibly unsustainable. We just can't continue doing this, period. Like, if you have a bank account with only so much money in it and you keep paying rent, but you're not making any money, there's a point that comes where you can't pay rent anymore and you get kicked out. And we are doing that with our ecosystems and what the base of resources that we depend on for food. And it's the plant-based food is not the answer. Like, everybody's saying, like, it's just this, it's so obvious and so clear. And this is why I wanted to get into farming, to experience it myself and visit dozens and dozens and dozens of farms and see all these systems. And the criticism is that regenerative agriculture can't feed as much people. And I don't really care. I care about being able to maintain feeding any amount of people.
Why is regenerative agriculture so much better than anything else? Just like explain it to me like I'm 5. With you is the first time I've really heard this term being thrown around.
It mimics nature in a way. So I covered it briefly before, like how we produce food degrades the ecosystem. So you take a piece of land and it makes it worse over time in a linear fashion until that land is unusable and you cannot take any more food out of it. Regenerative agriculture does the opposite thing, where the more you do those principles, the more food over time you can take out of it.
Okay.
And so if we're doing 99% of our farming in a way that is going to go to zero at some point, we need to start doing some of our farming that goes the other way. And there's, for example, like there's this concept called carrying capacity in agriculture. So if I have a 100-acre pasture and I have 10 cattle, and I just let those 10 cattle out there, and they're totally fine, and I now move that to 20 cattle, now there's not enough food, and the cattle start dying, and maybe they'll die to like 5 cattle because there's no more resources left for them. The same thing that is what we're doing right now. I think we're exceeding our carrying capacity as humans, but on a small scale, like there's ways to manage that land differently to integrate different species and to move the animals around, which mimics nature, because animals would have been forced with predators to move around. So you can do these certain systems in farming that have shown to about 16x the production of food output. In every other system that we use right now, over time it decreases. And we have to keep adding more fossil fuel based artificial fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, killing the environment over and over and over again. And so if we have a way to farm that we can do it in a way that fixes the environment and we can produce more and more and more food over time, like, this is a very simple, like, why are we not doing that? We want, and this is the thing around scale, like, we think we need more technology to do it. There's people who are like, well, let's build these massive skyscrapers that can produce microgreens and kale and whatever. It's like, okay, where are you getting the raw materials from? You're still on a system where you're extracting from one place to put that in another place and degrading over time the resource pool. You're degenerating the land. And if we're degenerating finite resources, we are going to be screwed at some point. Like, it's just that simple.
Heavy stuff.
I don't think it needs to be dystopian in a way. I think that we are going to have some hard times, but with all of human history, if we look at, I think that this is a time where we're going, like, we have some time now in relative stability. Everything's kind of like going the way it is to really focus on getting good at this stuff. And my hope is that if things get crazy, I don't know if it's going to be in 5 years or 50 years or 500 years. I make no predictions on that. I just know that the rate at which it's going is like, doesn't look good, that we will have enough seeds planted for the next generations to be able to, like, take the baton and do stuff. And hopefully we'll learn our lesson. And next time we get to a point of thriving civilization, if we do have any major setbacks, that it's at a point of harmony and respect of how we live our lives. I think that we're so divorced from where we get anything. I was sent this podcast like 8 times from this guy Siddharth on Joe Rogan. I don't know if you listened to this one yet, about cobalt mining and devices. This is the same thing. Like, we're doing this everywhere in the world with everything we're doing. Everything we use, we're so separated from nature. So we consume and consume and consume and have no cares or worries about where stuff comes from, and not asking the question of, can we keep taking things like this? And what happens if we continue doing this? And like you said, hopefully the prediction's wrong. Hopefully we figure out some crazy new technology and I'm just some dumb old grandpa being wrong. Like, I would love that to be the case.
Yeah. Well, what's beautiful about you and your message is you're not trying to profit off any of these predictions. This is just like, it's just the opposite. Like, you're literally paying money so that you could understand some of this stuff at a deeper level. And I'm sure you've paid a lot of money out of your own pocket to build the farm, to get the knowledge, to bring it to more people. Like, it's coming from a pure place. And I think that's what really attracted me to the message. And you have a great quote here about, if you are alive, you depend on death. And that hit home for me at such a deep level. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, just another way to think about the interconnectedness of all of the planet. I mean, it's just literally one organism. And you can look at this from many different ways. You can look at it from vegans complaining about people eating meat, which is absurd. Like, if you exist on so many levels, you depend on death. You depend on death when you're driving your car because the road was paved through an ecosystem that killed people, like killed animals to do that. If you drive a car, you're going to be killing things. But if you eat, if you want to survive and live, like, every living thing depends on dying things, and everything is going to die. And that cycle, once you start getting back into that cycle, you stop, you're more aware of this endless consumerism that we have, and endless, like, this expectation, which I have a huge issue with most of the techno-utopists, that just keep talking about, oh, we'll keep finding new ways, we'll live forever, no, that's not possible. Because we live in even if it's the universe, like, That will end at some point. Like, we live in finite bounds. And whenever we try to go outside of that and not participate within the cycle of life, and like, I die, I turn into other things. Other things die so they can turn into me. That richness, like, I don't want to be removed from that. And look, why would you want to be removed from that? Just so your ego and your fear of death can be satisfied forever? Is so twisted and rotten in my mind. And again, maybe I'm the crazy old grandpa already, 34, but it's just getting back into that way of living, which is another thing of being with the Hadza and their integration in nature and their harmony. And like, it's like almost like they didn't even think that they were humans and this thing was a tree and that was an animal. It's just they just were. And the more we can get back to that understanding, I think the better things are, and the more calm people are, the better they treat each other and the planet, and the more we can get through most of the challenging things that we have to work through as a society. So, it's my rant there.
I love it. What's a challenge we can leave people with after finishing this conversation? What should they do?
I would say, if you're compelled, go meet a small farmer near you and understand where your food comes from. That changes a lot. Once you get and meet the person who's doing it well, I pulled together a resource. It's totally free. I didn't even ask an email for it. It's called Groundwork Collective. So go there. There's a farm finder. We've put in like thousands of farms. I found the guy in Wisconsin by using this. And so I use it myself. I found the farm here in Hudson using it. Again, like, you don't even need to give me your email. I don't care. Just use it. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Do that. Find a farmer near you. Ask them some questions. See what's going on. And buy your food from a local farmer. Like, I think that can change a lot of people's lives once they start doing that. And the second level to that is, if you're an entrepreneur, yeah, use the computer, make some money, but like, figure out how you can make people's lives better. And this whole theme of, am I degrading the ecosystem? Ask that about like the customers that you're serving. Am I degrading their life to enrich mine? That mentality needs to end. And I think we need to think about, like, how can we restore this and provide more positivity, more abundance? Like, how can I make the person's life better than the money that I'm asking for them in return?
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me here today. Where's the best place to connect with you?
I have a podcast called The Natural State, which explores all of these topics. A newsletter does the same. And then just any social media, if you just want to search my name, Anthony Gustin, I'll pop up.
All linked below. Thank you so much for your time. Really grateful for you spreading the message and your eloquence as a speaker and the time that you've spent to really understand these topics. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.